Hello and welcome. When it comes to economic and social turnarounds, perhaps there is no other or better example than the state of Bihar. Once completely given up as a state that had gone to seed, now it's being held up as a paragon example of success, of focus and political will. So I'm going to talk to someone who's been actually studying this and has written a book on the subject called Bihar Breakthrough. And I'm joined by Rajesh Chakrabarti, Executive Director at the Bharti Institute of Public Policy. Rajesh, thank you very much for speaking with us. So the turnaround is a given, right? I mean, it happened. Bihar grew at almost 13% for several years in recent years, and pretty much has been one of the fastest growing states in the country. The question is, how did it happen? And what were the first steps that Nitish Kumar and as Chief Minister took to sort of create the preconditions for growth and then the conditions for growth?
Yeah, look, the Bihar story is indeed an amazing story of a turnaround of a large state. And you know, Bihar is quite large population wise. There are more people in Bihar than there are Germans in the planet. So it's a very large, very populous state, and it is one of the poorest states in the country. And interestingly, in the about 2 decades before Nitish Kumar came to power, it was becoming poorer in the sense that its per capita income dropped from 60% of India's per capita income in 1985 to 26% of India's per capita income in 2005. Right? So Bihar was slipping down, relatively speaking, vis-s-vis India. The reason was Bihar didn't get any with the benefits of liberalization or anything that happened in the rest of the country. And around 2005, when Nitish Kumar got the current NDA, now it's not NDA, now it's JDU, breakaway. But when Nitish Kumar became the chief minister, so Bihar was a state where roads practically did not exist. The schools and primary healthcare centers, right? The current thing was that only dogs go to primary healthcare center. Nobody went there. The footfalls were just not there. They were just completely dysfunctional. But the biggest scourge at that time, and probably the most visible one and the most discussed one, was the law and order situation. Right. So nothing worked and nothing rest could work until the law and order situation could be fixed. So that was a prime challenge for Nitish Kumar. And so Nitish Kumar came to power towards the end, I think November of 2005. And even before he had moved to his official bungalow, because that took a while to get that, right? He had called this young, not young, a senior police officer who was at that time the Additional Director General of Police, ADG, who is currently the DGP of Bihar, Abhayanand. Now, Abhayanand was known in police circles to be a solution provider, innovative thinker. And so there was a meeting early in the one winter morning in the makeshift CM residence. And Nitish Kumar told Abhayanand ji, ab police ki rutwa dikhaiye, show the power. Because this state, nobody cares about the cops. And tell me what you want. Do you want more stringent laws? I can give you more stringent laws. Do you want more money for guns, for jeeps, for whatever the cops need to make it work? So at that point, Abhayanand made a very interesting demand, so to speak. He said, I don't need the money and I don't need laws. Laws are fine. What laws we have here, we don't need equivalent of anti-terrorist or anti-something to get it done. Now, only thing that I need is, I don't want the politician in the police stations. Right? Give me a free hand and take the politicians off the back. We will deliver. And that is something we must give credit to Nitish Kumar for, that he really did that. But just getting the politicians off the back of the cops wouldn't do the deal, right? So, so there was the state followed a very, very thoughtful and very scientific innovation to actually fix the situation there. So and Abhayanand himself led, and the team led by Abhayanand, what they did was they did a little bit of an analysis, and they said that, well, you know, why does law and order not work in Bihar? It's not like the police cannot go and catch the criminals. That's happening. Arrests are happening. But arrests have lost all deterrent value because the arrested person freely walks out the next day, and there is no conviction following arrests. So there are people with 5 court cases, 10 court cases, 85 court cases, 135 court cases against them, and they are free individuals. So arrests have lost their meaning. So the problem is not so much with detection. The problem is with conviction. The court system is just not convicting these people. So what they did was quite innovative thinking. So they said, well, law and order, if you think about it, is almost like the currency of a country. When a sufficient number of people stop believing that law and order is working, then it is rational to break laws. Then why should you follow laws? Right. So you have to create an impression among the people that yes, law and order works. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy otherwise.
Broken windows.
Yeah, it's a broken windows. Exactly. So broken windows was precisely the phrase that was used in sort of getting the message across. And what they did was they went after one particular law. And this one particular law was carrying illegal weapons, possessing illegal weapons. Now this is almost like catching Al Capone for tax evasion, right? I mean, illegal weapons was like almost every third household in Bihar had an illegal weapon, right? At that point in time, things were so bad. Kidnapping had become the most noted industry. I mean, there's a Bollywood movie called Aparan, right? One of these movies by Mr. Prakash Jha, right? And that tells the story perfectly, the situation.
Also an aspiring politician in that part of the
yes,
country.
he has contested elections, yes. But the story there, what is fascinating is kidnapping was one of the key industries in Bihar at that point. And we call it an industry because it has specialized activities. So there would be some people who would specialize in abduction, some people who would specialize in holding of the hostage, some people who would specialize in negotiation. Yeah. So it was broken down.
Like the Somali pirates. Huh?
Yes, and nobody would know the other parties. And there would be a politically connected person who would keep the investigators at bay. So it was so well organized.
So this was the first thing to be fixed, you said. So it started by saying, let's go after the illegal arms.
Let's go after illegal arms.
Right. So what was next?
Yeah, no, but going after illegal arms was interesting. So they said that, well, why go after illegal arms? Because the law says that if you are prosecuting an illegal weapon holder, you need a minimum of 3 witnesses. And these 3 witnesses are the arresting officer, a ballistic person who says that this weapon is a functioning weapon, and a licensing authority person who says that it is unlicensed. That's it. There's no other, unless the judge asks for more witnesses, you don't need this. And all these 3 people are government officials. They can be asked to depose, right? Because otherwise, I mean, going in a courtroom and deposing against a criminal is almost a suicidal act in Bihar. How do you get normal people to come and depose? So Abhayanand sort of focused on that one particular law, and he said, we will actually look at the cases in a reverse chronological order. Meaning that the arrest that happens today will get immediacy in terms of prosecution.
So first in, first out.
First in, first out. Or rather last in, first out.
Last in, first out.
Last in, first out. When he did that, it was not that, well, you have to go through all the existing cases. Now that last in, first out policy now started saying that people would be coming in and within 30 days. So the cops get only about a few weeks of remand. If the guy is outside bars, then he can go destroy evidence, threaten witnesses, he's out of your reach. So he made it incumbent upon his SPs that you have to nail this guy while he's in custody. Right? And they started getting those results, and very soon it was apparent that an arrest now really meant conviction, as opposed to an arrest before where the guy would go in, spend a few hours, come out and walk freely. And that broke the back of the law and order situation. So that was the number one step. It was done in a very scientifically thought out manner. It was an innovation which completely changed the law and order situation. In 5 years' time, Bihar put 25,000 people behind bars just on that gun law, right? And which is more than the number of people that have been put to bar for all the other IPC cases combined in the state of Bihar, right? And when the time Nitish Kumar had become CM, these jeeps with people brandishing their weapons roaming through Patna and other places was a common sight. That has completely changed. I mean, if you go to Patna today, Patna is as bad as any other Indian city, but no worse. Right? So there are parks there, and at 9 o'clock you would find young couples hanging around there in the park, and it was unthinkable. After sundown, even men would hesitate to go out, forget about women. That has completely changed now. So law and order was the number one thing. The second thing that they did was the roads. And the person who did it, or did it very well, also there are lots of innovations that was done, was somebody who became Union Home Secretary, Mr. Rajkumar Singh, R.K. Singh. And so he was given charge of the roads building, and in 5 years, in 3 to 4 years, I'm just forgetting about the number of kilometers of road built in Bihar was 9 times than what was going on before. So it was not a 20% improvement, a 40% improvement, a 75% improvement.
It was a 500%.
It was a 900% improvement. Right. So they did that, and there were ways in which it was done, because the road building cartel would really block down. Government cannot build roads. Government has to contract it out to certain people. Now the eligibility criteria for people who can actually bid for those contracts were so restrictive that government was playing to the hands of 5 or 10 major road builders who could hold government to ransom. Government could choose no other than these 6 players who would form a team among themselves, allocate which areas to specialize in, and then they would not build roads on time, and government had nothing to do. So what R.K. Singh did was he changed many of those contracting rules, and that completely changed the road conditions in Bihar. And I have traveled in Bihar myself too. This is not hearsay. It's not just government documents. The road reality is very significant, and that changed lots of things. Accessibility to different parts of the state made a huge difference. The third thing they went after was schools and hospitals. So in the schools, there's the very famous bicycle program, right? The Balika, the bicycle program that happened. The logic there was that after class 8, the adolescent girl cannot travel to a far distant school because of security concerns and other things. So the best thing that we can provide that girl child would be to give her a bicycle. And lots of studies have looked at it. Just that bicycle have changed the enrollment rates in schools in a huge way. People have scientifically studied it, right? Looking at statistics. And even today, if you go to Bihar, it's a common sight for groups of girls in their blue salwar kameezes on bicycles going on these roads. Right? It's a common sight, and those bicycles have made a massive difference.
Just bicycles and roads. I mean, the roads and bicycles for women.
Yeah, that's just for girls.
Yeah.
Then several other projects. Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind, or rather, let me talk a little bit about the hospital parts, the healthcare. So in healthcare, they focused on the primary health center, PHCs. Right? Healthcare, the government healthcare is an elaborate process. So you have the district center, the primary healthcare. Then so they chose on the primary healthcare part. And the footfalls, there's a very interesting statistics. Around 2005, the average number of people going to a primary healthcare center in Bihar in a month was 39. Right. 5 years later, that number was 5,200. From 39 to 5,200. Right. So this is not a marginal change. This is what we call a complete. Now, the thing is, in each of these things required a lot of funding. What happened was much of this money was not even coming from Bihar. Most of these were centrally funded. So Nitish Kumar was lucky in the sense
that you had the National Rural Health Mission and so on.
So he got the benefit of the National Rural Health Mission. He got the benefit of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan.
Plus the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak
Yojana. Yeah, all of those came in. But credit has to be given in execution.
Of course.
Even before, so what was the irony of Bihar was here was one of the least developed states in the union, and the state was returning 60% of its funds back to the center because they just simply couldn't utilize funds. Once you get this NRHM money, it's a massive challenge to actually utilize the NRHM money, because you can only spend it on proper expenses, right? You have to actually build a school or build a hospital or man it with doctors. It's not easy. Where do you get doctors in Bihar? Where do you get nurses in Bihar? How do you make schools come up, make hospitals come up? Half of those buildings are falling down, right? So just spending that money was a huge challenge. And that is what Nitish Kumar did in a marvelous way. So at the end of the day, so the question also was, well, what did the leadership do? Because in my book also I have focused that it is not about Nitish Kumar. Nitish Kumar is one part of the story, of course. But there was these key bureaucrats who really made grassroots level innovations which really changed the situation.
But I think what it's boiling down to, I mean, we're running out of time, but I think what it's boiling down to is really, as you say, he attacked the fundamentals rather than, created some great grand
But also
economic.
one thing that he did, yes, he attacked the fundamentals, so he had his priorities very well set. But one thing that he did was he gave a huge amount of autonomy to the bureaucrats.
Sure.
Let them run. But he also monitored them like anything. So I don't know how many of my meetings have got rescheduled because the secretary was called to the chief minister's office so every 15 days the CM would have a monitoring meeting, and Nitish Kumar as a person is reputed to have an elephantine memory. So he would go there and say, Falana bridge क्यों नहीं हुआ अभी तक, उसका क्या update है आप बताइए. Now the respective minister in that department would be clueless, right? He would have no clue. So the conversation would really happen typically, I mean, barring a few ministers, conversation would typically happen between Nitish Kumar, his set of secretaries in the CM's office, and the bureaucrat. So that got him the tag of running what is called an Afsar Shahi, Officer Raj, right? So in some sense, what was happening was he was divorcing administration from the legislation side. And what Nitish Kumar also did was he completely cut out the effective power of these legislators. So in his drive to put law and order, he had put many of his own legislators behind bars, right? But the interesting thing is, come election time,
they were
they were not off because but they could fight elections from the jail cells. And what happened was, if you look at the number of tainted candidates in 2010 elections, the party that has the maximum proportion of tainted candidates in Bihar would be JDU, right? Now, but what happened was he would happily let those criminals fight elections. But post-elections, he would equally happily put them behind bars. So being an MLA really doesn't mean much today in Bihar. Your powers are all taken away, right? So now this is and I'm told, I have not done this firsthand, so it becomes a one-man show. And that is precisely how I'm told Narendra Modi runs Gujarat. I'm told that is how Naidu ran Andhra Pradesh.
Yes, yeah.
So it all becomes one-man dictatorship models. But what is interesting here is he's often asked that will it be Modi or will it be Nitish Kumar who would make a better PM, right? Of course, Nitish Kumar is much more acceptable among the minorities than Modi would be, so that's a different matter. But I learned this while writing this book, that apparently in a state level, a secretary actually has a choice of sending a file straight to the CM if the minister, if he has a difference with his own minister. You cannot do that at the center.
Correct.
So the PM is much more a first among equals, whereas CM has constitutional authority to run the place the way he wants it.
Right.
So a very effective CM need not necessarily make an equally effective PM.
And that's a point Bibek Debroy actually brought out when I was talking to him on and precisely this question. And I think he gave this point to me after having studied Gujarat in his book.
Yes,
Gujarat.
he studied Gujarat, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's an interesting.
so it's not clear because as a PM you have to be a consensus builder.
Yeah.
As a CM, if you are efficient and you can run the machinery well, you can run a one-man show.
Right, and I think that's a good sort of knowledgeable note to end our discussion. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Rajesh.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.